quotes of this.
A loop is a control structure that allows you to repeat a set of instructions multiple times. In DreamMaker, there are two types of loops, while loops and for loops. This video will be covering both types. The DM reference shows us that while loops work in this way. As long as the argument e is true, the while loop will continue to execute until it becomes false. As hinted at here, this condition e can be very complex if you need it to be. Our while loop today is just going to be doing jumping jacks. You can see that I've assigned a few new variables for mob. This is something we haven't covered yet, but these variables are all listed as temporary. This means that when a player's save file is created, these variables will always be excluded. This is something that you can get in the habit of doing to save space in your player's save files. Let's look at this while loop that we've written here. We are declaring a new variable here on line 9 called jumps. And jumps is just a number chosen by the user through an input prompt. Let's look at the conditions here on line 10. While the user's jump count is less than the number of jumps, things inside the while loop will execute. We know that our jump count is 0 by default. If we select 10 as the number of jumps, this loop will execute 10 times. Within the loop on line 11, the very first thing it does is check to see if the user's quit flag is true. We can see here by default that your quit flag is false. Let's come back to this quit flag here in a moment. The next thing that happens in this while loop is the user's jump count is increased by 1. Writing ++ here is the same thing as writing plus equals 1. We're incrementing this variable by 1 each time the loop executes. The next thing that happens is the user gets a text output. Remember, this is a good way to check and see if your code is working properly. After the text output, the user calls the jump procedure. Again, we'll touch on this in just a moment. And finally here on line 17, we're telling it to sleep for 10. Sleep just means the code is going to pause. And this 10 is equivalent to 1 second. We're saying this loop is going to pause 1 second each time it executes. Going back to our quit flag, this is a way to stop exercising if we need to. Here on line 19 is a verb called quit. And all quit does is set the user's quit flag to true. The next thing it does is it pauses again for 1 second. Then it sets the jump count back to 0 and the quit flag to false. The purpose of this quit verb is to stop doing jumping jacks and set all variables back to their defaults. And on that note, I'd like to show these jumping jacks in action. Tell me if you can spot the problem already. Let's do 5 jumping jacks. You can see that for each one, we get an output here, and there's 1 second in between each rep. But what happens if we try to do 5 more? Well, it's not working. That's because while this loop is incrementing the jump count, we're never resetting it back to 0. And with that, we will have fixed our problem. Let's confirm that, and we'll also check to see if our quit verb works. As you can see, the quit flag does break us out of this while loop. That's happening here on line 13 with this break. If the argument here on line 11 is true, we'll receive this text output and then we will break out of our while loop. And since we're already setting the jump count to 0 after the loop is broken, we no longer need this line 23. We've covered while, so now I want to take a look at for, the other type of loop. The for procedure can be used to iterate values over a fixed range or list. Similar to the while loop, we're checking the arguments within for. Specifically, we're doing 3 things here. In the first argument, we're initializing a variable. The second argument is either true or false. If it's true, the things within this for loop are going to execute. And the third thing we're doing is incrementing our variable. This will make more sense once we look at our own code here. In this verb, we're just holding our breath. Line 32 initializes a variable I. This can be anything. Within our for loop, in the first argument, we're saying that I is equal to 1. Next, we're asking, is I less than or equal to the user's lung capacity? And the third thing we're doing is incrementing I by 1. Referring back to our temporary variables, we've set lung capacity to have a default value of 10. Therefore, As long as the time that we've held our breath is less than or equal to our lung capacity, this for loop should execute. We're going to use the sleep procedure again. That's because we're counting up seconds. After waiting for 1 second, we're going to see this text output. You hold your breath for I seconds. This may be difficult to see, so I'm going to zoom in. What we're doing here in this text is using a \s. This is a built-in Dreammaker macro. Specifically, this macro determines whether the word is singular or plural. As with anything else, you should read about macros here in the DM reference. Finally, when the second argument here in our for statement is no longer true, we're going to break out of it and receive this text output. You can hold your breath no longer. Before launching the game again, let's talk about the other use for for. This usage of for iterates over items in a list. Here, we're looking for NPC trainers, and we want to find all NPC trainers in view distance 5 of the user. For each one of these objects, they're going to call the jump procedure. Then they're going to use the say verb. Since the things we're looking for are mobs, I know that they will have access to the say verb, because say is a mob verb. And again, between each one of these, we're going to sleep and wait 1 second. First, let's hold our breath. We'll see if that works. We held our breath for 10 seconds, and we iterated over that for loop 10 times. Then we broke out, and we received this text output. You can hold your breath no longer. Next, let's use for to iterate over a group of objects in a list. You can see that for each trainer NPC here, they introduced themselves, they jumped, and then waited 1 second. They did this one at a time until all 3 of them had done it. Our jump procedure is down here. We're not going to be covering animate in this video, but I would like for you to see what it looks like. Well, for all of you aspiring game developers, I would like you to come check out our community while you're learning. Our community Discord link will be in the description of this video, along with other helpful links, and we'll see you on the next one.